Facebook now. And we're letting everybody know that we're recording this meeting. So, hello, Tessa. Hello, Kate. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you doing?
Excellent. Happy Pub Day to you.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you
cheers
very much.
to that.
Cheers to that.
All the sales in the world.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Exactly. It is Pub Day these days are taking on a whole new meaning with the virtual world, but we still love hosting as many authors as we can, and it gives us the chance to do this. And I was telling Tessa in the green room, Kate, the pairings that we're able to do virtually is really one of the benefits that have come out of this whole crazy doing events virtually that I just absolutely love. So it's wonderful having both of you here tonight with us. I'm used to doing these earlier in the day, but so welcome. I'm going to fill a little bit of time. I'm looking at my bangs going, oh my God, my bangs look terrible. I'm going to fill a little bit of time just to give Facebook a little bit of time to notify everybody that we're here and so that they don't miss any of the conversation. But I am recording it and it'll end up, not only will it reside on Facebook all the time. So Tessa, if you want to go out and share it, that's always fun to do too. And then it'll be on our YouTube channel as well. So lots of good ways to keep spreading the word. It lives on in perpetuation, right? In perpetuity, I guess that's the word I was looking for. Anyways, just a little bit. Tessa's joining us from Santa Fe. Kate's usually in San Diego, but she's in Florida right now. So I'm not sure where everybody's joining us from, but just so that you know, if you're new to Warwick's, we're located in La Jolla, San Diego, California. And my little sign there says since 1896, we are actually celebrating our 125th anniversary this year. So it is, Warwick's is not the oldest bookstore in the country, but oldest continuously family owned. So Nancy Warwick is our 4th generation owner. So we're planning lots of fun 125th anniversary celebrations. So keep your eyes peeled with that. Check out our website, get on our email list. We have wonderful events all through the year. We're going to start some live stuff starting in September. So can't wait to get back and doing, but I think we're still going to keep doing this because this is really kind of fun. And I like being able to reach out to more than the San Diego community. So this has been really fun. For tonight's event, Tessa and Kate are going to chat for about 35 minutes. So we always love it if you're watching and you have any questions, and I'll be chatting with you in the comment section there too. If you are have a question or anything, go ahead and put that in the comment section. I'll feed those into Kate and we'll pop back in later to bring those into the conversation after they're done chatting. I will also be putting in Tessa's book into the chat. I always like to say any way there is to get a book, you can get it from Warwick's or your local independent. It's just as easy to click that buy button and have it shipped off to you. Or if you're in the San Diego area, we'd love to see you. So come on in the store. So I've chatted just way too much. So I'm going to get my intros done with both of you ladies and turn it over to you. So Tessa Arlen is the author of The Woman of World War II Mysteries. Born in Singapore, the daughter of a British diplomat. I'm hoping that we get a little bit of that conversation a little bit later too. She has lived in Egypt, Germany, the Persian Gulf, China, and India. She now lives with her husband in historic Santa Fe, where she gardens in the summer and writes in the winter. She's here tonight to talk to us about her latest book, like I said, out today, and Royal Service to the Queen. Kate, joining her tonight is Kate Quinn. Kate is the New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of historical fiction, a native of Southern California. She attended Boston University, where she earned bachelor's and master's degrees in classical voice. A lifelong history buff, she has written 4 novels in the Empress of Rome saga and 2 books set in the Italian Renaissance before turning to the 20th century with The Alice Network, The Huntress, and The Rose Code. All have been translated into multiple languages. She and her husband now live in California with 3 Black rescue dogs. With that, ladies, have a great conversation. I'll see you in about a half hour.
Thank you.
All right, great. Well, I can't wait to kick this off. Tessa, first of all, it was so lovely to get to read your book. It's lovely to be able to get to chinwag in person. So I'm so glad we were able to do this.
Yes, I've been looking forward to it.
Yes, me too. Now, first of all, do you want to just give the very quick plot précis for royal service to the Queen? We will be avoiding spoilers, anybody who's watching, but
I will
do you want to just give the overview?
Yeah, I'll be very careful not to spoil anything, which I do have a tendency to do sometimes. In Royal Service to the Queen is a fictionalized account of the present Queen's governess, Marion Crawford, who served the royal family for a little over 16 years. Looked after the girls during World War II at Windsor Castle. And in 1950, wrote a book called The Little Princesses. But it was preceded by a series of articles for the Ladies' Home Journal, an American magazine. So she was really the first royal servant to kiss and tell. And it didn't end well for her.
Well, where and how did you first hear about Marion Crawford?
My mom, in 1988, when Marion Crawford died, she mentioned her. I said, oh, that terrible woman who wrote this book about the royal family, unauthorized. Oh, poor woman, she died. And I was like, what do you mean she wrote a book about the royal family? Because nobody did, they were sacred, even, well, no, maybe not in the 80s, but they certainly were when Marion in 1950 published her book. And it kind of lodged. It wasn't really something that I paid much attention to until I was talking to my agent. And I don't know how we got onto the subject, but I mentioned her and she said, you've got to write this story. So I promptly sent off to Amazon and got myself a copy of The Little Princesses, which was a charming book. It was full of sweet anecdotes about the girls. It was such a loving account, and it was shocking to think that.
Why would anyone object to that?
Yeah, I think it was just the time. It was the time. It was a different scene for the royal family then. They were handled very, very respectfully. And the book was respectful and it was lovely. So I started delving into it. And then I thought, I want to write this woman's story. I want to know what sort of relationship did she have with the Queen Mother, Princess Elizabeth's mom? What kind of relationship did she have with the girls when they grew up? Because she was kept on until Margaret was something like 18. And, who needs a governess when you're 18? I was really curious as to why, the length of time this woman had spent, and also that she put so much on hold. Her marriage, her personal life, everything was shelved to serve. So those were the questions that led me to write a fictional account of Marion's story.
So once you had your spark of inspiration, that Marion would be your heroine, how did you decide how to focus your novel? Because she had this long career with the royal family, and that spanned the Wallis Simpson scandal, the abdication of Edward VIII, which throws, the new king and his daughters into so much more prominence than they might otherwise have expected. Then there's the war and the post-war years, Elizabeth's courtship with Prince Philip. How did you decide what to focus on when there was so much to cover?
I wanted it to be Marion's story. I didn't really want it to be an account of those fascinating incidents. And everybody, of course, is completely drawn to Wallis and David, who became Edward VIII, and his decision to leave the monarchy. And yes, I refer to it because it's background, and it was a terrible shock for everyone. And then it transpired that maybe he wouldn't have made a very good king anyway, because he was a huge Nazi sympathizer. So
I think England dodged a bullet there.
I know. So I was like, well, yeah, I know everybody, but everybody really knows that story. So what I wanted to concentrate on was what it was like to be basically a servant to the royal family in such a feudal time, still very feudal times, despite how progressive England was, or thought it was, after World War II. And so I wanted to concentrate on the rift, and I wanted to focus on her life and relationship, not just with the daughters, but with the Queen Mother, and what had causes rift, and why, and had there been a sort of falling out before she wrote the book. Because I think basically things were not that good between her and the Queen after the war. The Queen had really found her own during the war, and she had an awful lot of power, not constitutionally, but certainly within the palace, and a lot of clout. And I realized that from reading lots of biographies that she really disliked Philip, and not so much personally, but the fact that he was an alpha male, very liberal for the time, very strong, and her daughter was putty. I mean, she was just completely smitten with him. And I think she recognized, the Queen recognized a sort of power struggle in the making. So I decided that Crawford would champion Elizabeth in her quest to marry Philip.
I've read some of that information myself, since I did my own research into the whole Elizabeth and Philip courtship. And it is one of those things that, I think a modern audience can be a little surprised at, is that, Philip, who we've all seen now, for so long as, such a fixture of the palace and the monarchy, was, seen as something of an outsider and a little bit disreputable, and certainly, entirely too outspoken for some people's tastes, and that the Queen was not very fond of him.
No, she called him the Hun.
Yes, she did. It's like, oh, that's a bit awkward on me.
And there was, I mean, he did have skeletons in his closet. His family were really iffy. I mean, he was doubly more royal than Lilibet, than Princess Elizabeth. Yet he had this spotty past simply because the war was over, and he had sisters who were married to very high-ranking German aristocrats in the Third Reich. And then he had this terrible father who ran off after they got kicked out of Greece. They had to run away from Greece because Philip's uncle was tried for treason. And then what happened is the dad runs off with his mistress to the wrong part of France, and he's in Vichy, France. And then after the war, he's in Paris, and Philip's mom had a nervous breakdown. I mean, a terribly tragic nervous breakdown. So with all this going on, right, and the Windsors are, the Queen's dragged the Windsors back into, a perfect standing with her marvelous war works, and the abdication has been hopefully forgotten. And then all of a sudden, Elizabeth announces that she's in love with Philip. And Crawford champions her. Crawford quietly encourages her, stick up for yourself, go for what you want. And I think that was eroding her relationship with her boss.
So are you a fan of the modern, the royal family in general? I mean, how relevant is a constitutional monarchy today, in your opinion?
No, I'm not a fan, because our monarchs are not celebrities. And when I was a girl, and I'm not going to tell you when that was, but really, when I was growing up, they were considered to be dull and frumpy, not terribly bright, not terribly charismatic. rather dull, and the Queen often looked terribly grumpy. So basically, they were the king and queen, and I didn't think twice about them. I didn't spend any time thinking about them. Now, actually, I think she's rather wonderful, the old queen. She's had so many terrible things happen in her family, and she manages to stick by her duty and follow through on everything she promised when she was 21. And so I have a sort of respect for her, simply because of that wonderful dignity and that wonderful separation, that she never caves and never, she always holds everything wonderfully together, despite some of the awful things that are happening in her family. And as for, will it continue? Who knows?
Well, it's one of those things, I do think that, one question I think I would always ask is, I wonder why Americans are so fascinated by the English royal family. I think it's this idea of, I don't know, it's what we lost. But I certainly, like what could have been us, if not for, a few things going differently post 1776. But I will say one thing, I share your respect for I'm no royal watcher, but I share your respect for the Queen, because in the last year with the pandemic, there were a number of times when she got on and gave a speech and damn near brought me to tears, because she had that wonderful way of just, being able to impart calm and dignity and give one the impression that, all right, we'll get through this. We absolutely will. We have got through worse, and we'll get through this. And, I think that in itself bolstered a lot of my own, feeling about her and her respect for her position. But why do you think Americans are fascinated by the royal family? Since, you have this, view of a Brit who is living in America, and I'm sure you've seen the insanity that is in culture about British royals.
I've lived in America for a long time, actually. For a long time, since 1983. So it's been a while. But I think what it is a sense of loss. I just want to say one thing about the monarchy is that when you have a government that's continually changing and it's run by politicians, and these days we're looking at politicians who aren't always very straightforward, or probably ever have been, but there's more transparency about what's going on in government now. To have somebody who stoically carries on no matter what, I think is very comforting. So apart from the Queen, who I think is a solid character, I think there's a celebrity status around the royals in this country, and it's like, the Queen is like this sort of godlike creature who is untouched by the things that we are touched by. She doesn't escape criticism, but she's Teflon. It doesn't seem to stick. She's not, she might have a frightful family sometimes, but what actually is that she endures. She just continues on. No one ever accuses her of corruption or trying to hang on to the throne by devious means. And I think that's possibly one of the big draws of this fascination. And then, you went off and you didn't want us. So instead.
Yes, we did.
And good luck. You say good luck with that. And here we are. But People magazine have actually brought out a quarterly edition called People Royals, which is entirely dedicated to every single thing that William and Kate and Harry and Meghan and the Beatrice and the Eugenie are all doing and wearing, and you can buy clothes like theirs, and it's an absolute saturation of royalty. And I think to myself, this is astonishing.
I find it astonishing too, I must admit. Now, what do you think are the differences you see in the way that outsiders or non-royals are treated today from the day and the treatment that Marion Crawford received when she was with the family? Because you used the word feudal earlier, which I think is totally correct. And anyone who reads your book is going to get that sense of it, that this sense of loyalty was just expected to go so far. And so talk a little bit about that. What are the differences you think, and how are things changed?
Well, first of all, Marion came from a very, very lower middle class background. She was the first person in her family to go to college. And she was a really nice Presbyterian Scots girl, very respectable. I'm sure she was incredibly naive and impressionable. And she fell in love. She fell in love with the York family, and she remained in love with them. She adored the girls. They were her life. They became her children. So her situation, as opposed to, say, Princess Di, or Meghan, who married in, or even Philip, who was considered an outsider, who all married into a system that had been set up and operated very efficiently within protocol. And their problem was adjusting to their own individuality and their personalities into something that was not going to change, was absolutely cost. And the palace courtiers made sure that that is what happened. I mean, which is why, Edward VIII had to abdicate, because there was no way they were going to let that woman in. And then, of course, things loosened up, and we had Fergies and Dies, and now we have Megans, and everything's open and transparent. Whereas everything for Crawford was hidden and squashed, and she was not allowed to move out of that little niche that prevented her from being forgiven for writing that book. She could not be forgiven. She had broken the code. And so for Crawford, it was banishment. And they kept it up for the whole of her life. She used to wait for them to possibly drop in and have tea. She bought a house on the road to Balmoral. She was convinced she would be forgiven, but she'd crossed the line. And now everyone's crossing lines all over the place, and it's a different time. So I think it only has to do with the time in which Crawford was employed and the time that exists now. I mean, Meghan has rescued Harry, basically, is how most people look at it.
So why is it that historical fiction has drawn you? I mean, do you have a favorite era or period that really pulled you in?
I've always been fascinated. It was the only thing I was really good at school, to be honest. I had an amazing history teacher. She was a professor of Elizabethan history and the parliamentary system. She was incredible. She was about in her late 70s when she was teaching us. And I found it fascinating. So to me, I can't imagine writing fiction set today. Could you? Could you write fiction set today?
I have to admit, I never have. And it's, if I did, it would have to have some sort of extremely strong historical hook in it somewhere, because I have always gravitated toward the past. And, for me, it was because my mother was a librarian and also had a degree in ancient and medieval history. So, I'm the one who's learning about history as a kid. And, I was, I had at least these weird games when you're a child and you absorbed a lot of history. I had a game in elementary school where I was marching around with a soccer ball under my arm because I was pretending that I was Margaret Roper retrieving my father, Sir Thomas More's head from the Tower of London to give it a proper burial because I had heard that story. You know, I think some elementary school teachers of mine were really quite worried. But you know, these are the things that you end up getting, you know, fascinated by when you're young, and it gets its hooks into you, and it never lets go.
Oh, I agree. I mean, to me, history is is compelling, and there isn't one particular era that when I was 14 or 15, for me, it was the Plantagenets, and I remember the first time we did Geoffrey Chaucer. Well, not the good bits of Geoffrey Chaucer, but we did the you know, the proper bits of Geoffrey Chaucer for English literature. And I was like, this is the only information available about ordinary people in history. Most of them are chronicles of aristocrats and kings and queens and battles and parliament and how it was formed and all of that. But in the 14th century, Chaucer was writing stories about millers and maids and tradesmen. And I was like, my God, people really, you know, people were really the same as they are now. They, you know, they're like us, but in a wholly different world. And I think that is what pulls me in to writing historical novels.
So what got you onto your path of, you know, really of not just wanting to write historical novels, but really getting your beginning there, you know, as a professional novelist?
You know, it's the strangest thing. I've always written, but I've never thought about writing a book. Our youngest daughter left home, and I, you know, it was October in the Northwest and pouring with rain. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? There was no gardening. The garden was soaking wet. I want to go and work in a shop downtown because basically I'm not terribly qualified to do anything. And I thought, you know, I should write a novel. And and I just thought maybe I could just see if I could write a whole book, you know, if I could keep it going. And so I did. And I chose historical. I chose historical because I wanted to write about the Edwardian era. And I chose a mystery because I wasn't terribly sure how I was going to keep the plot going, you know? So I could go from murder to murder and red herring to red herring, and I kept on going, and I wrote far too many words. And I ended up with this book. And then my husband said, you should find an agent. And I was just, and that took a long time. But then I found my agent, and she sold the book in 5 weeks. And I was like, what? And of course, you know, I was addicted. You know that feeling?
Yes, I do.
You finish a book and you're like, phew. And then you're like, oh, compulsive.
Well, now I'm bored.
Yes, now what do I do?
My husband, maybe it was my mother, called it the my book is finished and I wish I were dead blues.
Yes. Yes.
Very much. It's that feeling of, you know, like it's done and you have the euphoria and it's like, I'm going to lay around and do nothing but binge Netflix for weeks now. And then, you know, 2 days later, I'm sitting there. Like,
yeah. And I'm the same. Though my husband has told me, and my daughters have told me too, you're really impossible when you are writing because you're just not present. And no, you're right. I'm not. And I do. I become so involved in the world I'm creating and the people who live in it. It's wonderful. I mean, I just love, it's immersive and compelling.
I think it's the best hobby in the world. Like if I wasn't, and I say hobby because I would be doing this even if I was not lucky enough to also be able to make a living from it, because there is nothing like having this world that's going on in your head all the time. You know, it's constantly entertaining. It's constant food for thought. You know, it's a hobby that does not require expensive equipment or a level of fitness which is difficult to achieve after the age of 25. It is, it's not fattening, it's not bad for you, it's the best hobby in the world, just tell stories.
And you're absolutely right. I think the best thing about it is it's addictive, but it's harmless, and it keeps me sharp. It keeps me really sharp and really involved in absolutely involved in something. And I think the tragedy now, especially women of my age, is that you end up with grown children and you're and they're off. And they say things like, no, mom, I'm fine. Thank you. Love you. Bye. Everything's like push, push, push. And here I am going, oh, you have to go now. Because this is my writing time. And it's wonderful. Keep me very happy. Except for the day the book comes out.
And that's today for you.
And that's today. And you go, it's fine. Don't worry.
I do find, I tend to do, it was a difficult thing, during lockdown, but it's the sort of thing where I have learned that, and I have some lovely writer friends who do this for me and I do it for them. But when anybody has a release day, the idea is that the others will take her out to lunch and remove her phone from her by force, if necessary. The phone is confiscated and you have a few hours where you are absolutely forbidden to check your Amazon sales rankings. And I have found that this is really quite good as far as, trying to keep your sanity on launch day.
I don't have any friends here who'll do that for me. That is, God, what a brilliant idea. I need to work that part out because I just become kind of withdrawn and moody.
Well, that's the thing about when a book comes out, though, is because it's not like a movie premiere where you have an event to go to and, get gussied up. And it's not like having there's not an event attached to it exactly. It's just that the book hits shelves. And it's not even, again, like a movie or, an event where it's going to be done and then people will have reactions to it because you need to give them time to read it. So you're not even going to get reactions for a little while. So you're left sort of sitting around your house, well, again, hitting refresh in your Amazon sales rank, and it's not good for the sanity. So I really recommend the lunch method. I'm
going to do the lunch thing. But you know what? I had this vision around about the second book that I wrote came out, because Crawfie's as I call this book, Crawfie, it's the seventh. So I learned a trick or two. And one of the things I did was I would wake up on publishing day and I would imagine my hundreds of books flapping through the air to bookstores.
I love that, like a book flock.
A book flock, all racing towards bookstores. But the rest of it is, you're right, it's a very passive, nothing happens. It all happens in a couple of weeks.
It does. That is difficult. Yeah. So what does a typical writing day look like for you?
Morning. First thing. I've got better. When I first started writing, I'd be up there in my PJs, hammering away. Now I at least brush my hair and take the dogs out. But that's it. It's really all morning. I can't, I'm done by after lunch. I'm completely, what about you?
Well, I'm the exact opposite. I am not a morning person in any way. And to be honest, this lockdown has done its best to push me toward almost a completely nocturnal schedule. I'm such a night owl. So my thing is that, I get up, I'm really not good for much in hours that are single digits. And I am good I use my mornings to do things like walk dogs and hit the gym and do any errands that absolutely can't be pushed off. And then after that, it's lunch. And then after lunch, I tend to write all afternoon and into the early evening. That's at least what I've found works best for me. So everybody's different, though.
Yeah. Well, the wonderful thing is that we don't have to get dressed up and go and see people or drive to an office or do any of those things. We can just potter around our layers. But I'm curious because I love the Rose Code. I'm curious as to what led you to Bletchley Park.
Oh, well, I think it may have originally been the fact that I read Robert Harris's wonderful novel Enigma, which was really such great fun, and it was great. And that was, really the start of it. And then after that, I kept reading on and off about it over the years. And then maybe about 4.5 years ago or so, I really hit the idea of maybe I could write about code breakers. Maybe that would be something. And I really got more interested in that idea the more research I did, because I realized that, at its height, Bletchley Park employed nearly 9,000 people in 45, and yet nearly 7,000 of them were women. And yet most of the books I was reading were focused on these male figures, these wonderful figures like Dilly Knox or, Gordon Welshman or Alan Turing. And, certainly those men deserve every drop of ink that's written about them. But at the same time, I thought, what were the ladies doing? What were the women up to? Let's hear about them. And then that really was the kickoff point for the Rose Code. So anyway, I'm very glad you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Oh, I did. I did. I actually, out of the 3 books, I loved your first one about, the Alice Network. I thought that was incredibly clever.
Oh, thank you very much.
And it was very compelling reading. So I was, when I read about Jill Bletchley Park, I was thinking, how does she know all this? How does she know about Bletchley Park? Because it's become more talked about now, but there was a time when I don't think anybody knew it existed.
It was really in the 70s that you started to finally see the floodgates open. No one really knew much until then, but that was really the point when that 30-year mark had passed, and there was some consideration that maybe now the Official Secrets Act was done. Although it is not the opinion of many of the veterans who continue to find that oath as binding in perpetuity. But that was when you got the first book, which was the Francis Winterbotham book about, which is the first Bletchley Park book. And then a number of other articles and memoirs started to be written. And then that was really the start. And so actually, I found myself, I was worried I wouldn't have enough to research for something this classified. And actually, I was drowning in material because there were so many pieces written about the work there and the daily life. And then there were so many memoirs that were written, or essays that people wrote about what their war had been like when they worked there. And that really does lead me to the fabulous thing that we were talking about in the green room before this, is that your father actually worked at Bletchley Park, which I am trying to express a tremendous amount of fangirling about this.
Yeah, well, he was pretty much a teenager, because he was born in 1925. So he was frantic to be a Spitfire pilot. And
of course, which is what all teenage boys want to be.
He used to go after school. He used to get on his bike with his cousin Dave and go to the local airfield and polish Spitfires because it made them go faster. It's kind of like cyclists shaving their legs, You don't want anything to hold you up. So he was an RAF cadet, and he was then when he was 19 or so. As an RAF, he was I don't know what rank he was. He was a cipher clerk, and I don't know any more about his time there than that, because he was recruited from there at the end of the war into the Foreign Office, and so he was a civil servant for the rest of his life, and a very loyal, and he was a real flag waver, and just would never have breached his security at all, ever. And I say to him, my husband thinks you were a spy during the war, and he would just.
I was thinking myself, did he have one of those nondescript job titles that is something like cultural attaché? Because people with job titles like
Yeah,
cultural
but you know,
attaché with the Foreign Office are the people who have very interesting jobs.
I'll tell you something really interesting, because my dad wasn't. He was a lovely man. He was charming and he was delightful and he fit in with everyone. So he was a perfect diplomat. But when I was about 17, 18, my parents were in Delhi. And so I finished high school and I had to go and spend a year with them in Delhi, which I didn't want to do because London was much more exciting. But one of the wives of the commercial attaché was Stella Remington. Do you know who she is?
Was what? Sorry, I didn't get the first name.
Stella Remington.
It's ringing a bell.
She became head of MI6. She was M. But when I knew her, she was a very ordinary, pleasant, easily forgettable wife. And when the Brits get abroad, they love to put on plays. It's one of their things. And I was there, so my mother said, "Oh, well, this is what you're going to do." And Stella Remington and I were in a play together, and she played my mom. And then years later, my father, right out of the blue, said, "You remember Stella Remington?" And he told me that she was now head of MI6. And I thought, well, this just makes complete sense.
Oh, I love that. That is fabulous. Yeah, that is great.
Yeah. So when when I read your Rose Code, I thought, my God, how does she know all this stuff? And then I realized, of course, the Official Secrets Act is now open for that. But it was.
Although there's still plenty that there's plenty that's there. I don't think we're ever going to know.
No.
And I look at that and I sometimes think like, what is there that we don't know? Which is why I ended up having this big, spy drama in there, because I thought there were spies. There was a spy. There was a Russian mole at Bletchley Park. There were spies in the Foreign Office and in MI6 and MI5. And those are the ones we know about, which means it's pretty good odds there were some we didn't know about, and we never will we'll never know if maybe they were caught or what happened to them, or if they weren't caught. And there's a lot that goes on that we're not ever going to know about at that level. And that's what I find, that's where a novelist gets to have fun, because it's gray area. We get to play in gray area.
Yeah. And that's absolutely the best thing to do, is to conjure up answer all your questions yourself and say, well, I think, Burgess and McLean, Philby, George Blake, all those men look like my dad, and did ordinary everyday jobs in an embassy or a charge d'affaires or high commission. And they all did unspeakably treacherous things.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant.
So on that note, we
so
have
fascinating. So bad. We can keep going on and on, but we've got all kinds of questions coming in. So yes, I wanted to pop in.
We can keep going, but let's hear some questions.
I know we're gonna have to do this in a 2-part series. So you've got lots of love out there, Tessa. Everybody wants to read the book. It sounds fascinating. People are thrilled with the cover. There's all kinds of good stuff coming in. So go back to Facebook and you can look at those comments later. But so I'm just going to go through some of the questions here. So Arlene is asking, how did Croffy cope with the royal family's banishment? Do you think she regretted writing The Little Princesses?
Oh, yeah, I think she did. And here's a terribly tragic and true fact, is that when George, her husband, died, because he was much older than her, she lived in this nice, comfortable house on the road to Balmoral, literally hoping they would stop by. She tried to commit suicide twice. So I think her heart was broken. And did she regret it? Possibly, because I think rather than being treacherous, she suddenly became disobedient. And her relationship with the Queen mother, not the present Queen, but her mother, had broken down. And so I think there was resentment And
Yeah.
she made a mistake.
Yeah.
Regretted probably for the rest, what evidently for the rest.
Nancy's wanted to know, is the book going to be an audiobook? Do you know?
Oh, yes. And I love the narrator.
Good.
I've just listened to some of it today. It's absolutely wonderful.
So it's not out yet.
It
Or
is.
Oh, it is out.
Yeah.
Okay. I wonder if it's on Libro.fm. I'll have to look and see. I can put that link in later into the comment section, which is the so let me do that too. Let's see. So Cheryl wants to know, was there anything you discovered while researching Coffee that surprised you?
Oh, good question. I didn't really know very much about Philip. I just thought, it's just another royal. So delving in, and I read, I'm sure Kate has done this. You research by reading biographies, memoirs, and then what you do is you kind of go, okay, that's it. I'm putting it all, I'm going to forget it. You absorb it so that when you write about these people, it has a place in authenticity because you've informed yourself. But the whole of the Philip revelations about his family and his youth were fascinating. And this was just as The Crown was coming out, I think, and I loved the first season of The Crown. I lost interest after that because I'm not terribly interested in the present day royal family, but I was fascinated by the old Windsor bunch. So I think it was discovering the sort of life Philip had led.
Prior to him coming into the family?
Yeah, he was kind of like a world's orphan,
Yeah.
Really
was
tragic.
there anything that is there any tidbit that you want to talk about that you left out of the book? That's
Whoa. Crawford was falling in love about the same time as Lilibet, as Princess Elizabeth. So I kind of ran them as parallel love stories. And there was this whole thing about sex, which I have a terrible problem writing about. I'm not, I have this thing that it's like deeply private. So I was like, would she have slept with her husband before she married him? So I had this belief that Crawford, for all her, Presbyterian, starchy woman, often was really a very passionate woman. But that's my Crawford, and I have no idea. There's hardly any information about this woman. Just
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So I
Really?
made her mine,
Which is, like you said, that's the fun of being a fiction writer, is you can make these things, and
and then you have people
life.
who say, well, is that true? And you go, well, it's fiction.
Some people don't
Look at
understand
you,
what
like,
that means.
What does that?
And it's also about the fact that a historical record, if you're writing nonfiction, it's perfectly okay to say, we don't know blank. We don't know if Crawford and her husband, who had this very long drawn out courtship, how intimate they became. We just simply don't know these things. It's okay to say that in an article, which is nonfiction or, like a nonfiction book. But if you're writing a novel, you have to come down on one side or the other.
Yeah.
You have to,
you actually have to have an opinion. So you have to say, like, all right, well, for the purpose of this book, I'm going to decide that, yes, romantically speaking, they became involved before they were married, rather, or and I'm going to base this decision on X, Y, and Z. But you have to make a decision. You can't just be ambiguous, or else it's going to be a terribly boring novel.
Well, and then it kind of loses, whatever authenticity when we're talking about fiction, but that loses that sort of thing, that thread of authenticity that you want to bring into fiction.
And once you committed yourself, you have to follow through. You can't just have Crawford and George being extremely attracted to one another for years without this becoming an issue. And it doesn't matter that it was the late 40s and that she was a nice Presbyterian Scots girl. What mattered was that she and George were deeply attracted, which helped her to understand why Elizabeth should pursue a desire to marry Philip.
Yeah. Now this question is for both of you. So Kate, we'll go with you first on this one. It's a long one, so bear with me. Do you ever suffer from book hangover where the characters stay with you for a long time after you complete a book? Or are you completely ready to dive into the process for the next book?
Is this books I'm writing or books I have read?
Writing. I think it's a
writing.
book. It's a book writing.
Well, I guess it would be the sort of thing where a little bit of both. I mean, I do have a sense of missing characters when they're done, probably because, you know, it's like that drafting process is kind of magical. You know, it's lovely to get to the end of it, and at the same time, it's like, oh my goodness, I'm done now, and there won't be more words that I'm drafting about them. But on the other hand, I always feel like the characters go on in my head, even if they're fictional. It's like I know what the rest of their lives look like. I know what they're up to. So it's like I kind of feel like they live there anyway. And you know, plus I do hit a certain point generally in the editing process, however, where I hate the book so much because I'm so tired of it that I am desperate to be done with it. And there's usually the stage where, you know, it's like you want to throw it in the fire and never speak of it again. But, you know, this is the advantage of working with a laptop and not paper, because you're not going to throw your laptop in the fire no matter how frustrated you get. Whereas if you had a stack of paper, it would be a close thing. So I hit the point where I get tired of the book and I want it to be out of my head very badly indeed. And then usually it hits the publication, you know, churn, and it's some months before I see it again. And by the time I see it again, usually my hatred has abated and I remember the reasons why I liked the story to begin with. And then I usually decide, all right, maybe it's not so bad.
It's not so bad. How about you, Tessa?
I think I completely understand what Kate was saying there. I get really immersed in my characters, and they become not just mine, but they really live. They live with me all day, and they're first thing I think of when I wake up in the morning. And then I do get to that phase. I also feel a kind of despair, like, oh God, this is going to be terrible. And I'm never, oh God, what am I doing? And it's usually when I start reading after the first draft, and I'm just convinced that it's that nobody will want to read it. And then there's that relief of it's finished, off it goes. And but they linger. There's a lingering feeling about the people you've written about. So when your editorial comments come back, I just love that part, because somebody is reading it and giving you really intelligent feedback.
Constructive, yeah.
And it stimulates you all over again.
Brings it back to life for you.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Crawford, in Royal Service to the Queen, was easily the most immersed I've ever been in anything I've written. And
we've got two more questions. So this one, Arlene says she loves the cover and it was very striking and atmospheric. Do you think writing this specific book will influence your future writing projects in terms of ideas, point of view, etc.?
Yeah, well, I think
before. That's great. I want to see. Yeah, what's next?
What's next is another standalone historical novel set in the 1890s through to the beginning of the First World War, about a woman, a real woman, who was deserted by her husband and left completely penniless with a daughter to support. And she happened to have a wonderful talent for making clothes. And so she established what became an international European and American label, fashion house. And her name was Lucille Duff Gordon. And she was quite a girl, and lived this independent life, had an amazing flair for PR, and designed some incredibly beautiful clothes. And she was innovative. She was the first fashion designer to have a runway show. She designed lingerie, really lovely stuff. She dressed theater. She was everywhere. She wrote magazine articles. She swore she would never get married again, and she did. And she and her husband were on the Titanic when it went down, and they survived. And then there's the end of the story, which
Okay, you got me hooked. That's a great.
So I'm just waiting politely for my editor to tell me whether it's all right or not.
Green light, the green light.
The
Okay,
green
last question.
Can I ask Kate what she's doing?
I was going to ask that after we're done. I was going to ask that too, because we're going to do a little closing thing. So we want to know what Kate's working on too. But this question's for both of you as well. So the research, and you kind of answered it a little bit in the research process and how you you get the research and then you put it aside and then you start writing. But what the question is what is your favorite part of the process? So Kate, why don't you go with that one first?
I do like the drafting process. I like it, that is when it's really humming along. There's nothing like it when the words are really flowing and it feels new and it's still sort of your own private country. You know, you haven't shared it with anyone yet. I really like that. And or maybe I just have rose-colored glasses because of the last one that I did, because what I'm doing next is I just finished the drafting process pretty much, and I'm waiting for my feedback now from my editor on what I have next. And that book.
Okay, you give us the clue since you're talking about it. What is that? Can you give us any clues?
Yes, I can. It's titled The Diamond Die. It's coming out in late March of 2022. And it is about the most lethal female sniper in all of history, who was a Russian woman, a single mother, a grad student, and a history buff who just wanted to be a historian someday, you know, finishing her dissertation, and Hitler invades her country and she ends up at the Russian front and she becomes a sniper who earns the nickname of Lady Death, which is about the coolest nickname ever. And if that wasn't enough, I learned that she was then, you know, she was famous enough that she was sent on a goodwill tour to America in 1942 and basically became America's sweetheart, if you can imagine, like a really lethal Russian girl becoming America's media sensation. And then, you know, as one does, she just happened to become BFFs with Eleanor Roosevelt. So I just heard about this and I was like, I can't not write this.
Oh my God. That's just
the next book
fraught with just all kinds of.
It is. And I wrote that really fast. It felt like just the words were flowing. I love the drafting process for this last book. It was especially wonderful.
And okay, so speaking of that, I'm sorry, we're going a little bit long here and I'll let you ladies go in a minute, but it's so fascinating too. So you wrote that during the pandemic then? You were able to
I was in the summertime. I did a natural amount of plotting and outlining, which normally I don't do because I get bored with it halfway through. And I decided I can write now. I can do it now. I'm just going to stop outlining and start writing. But I had a sensation a lot of writers were having, which was that I was creatively pretty flatlined in the summertime around this time last year. So I couldn't write, but I could outline. So I did a lot of outlining and a lot of researching. I did all of it on the front end. And then fall rolled around and I started drafting, and suddenly I drafted the entire book, like 105,000 words in 3.5 months flat, which normally is not happen that fast for me. But this was during the fall and then into the new year. And it was when we were experiencing, you know, spiking pandemic numbers, the lockdown would not end, and the absolute forest fire that was the election. And I think that honestly, my muse basically decided that the World War II Russian front looked like a freaking spa in comparison to anything that was happening on my news feed, and decided to dive in headlong and just put in extra time there. So I think that's why it happened so quickly.
Well, and also it was probably a really good thing to just like, you had a really good excuse to not watch the news. It's like,
Oh yeah,
I am so
it was
into this.
pure
It's like, you know.
escapism.
So Tessa, for you, what is your favorite part of the process?
Dreaming up the idea, and then I outline pretty thoroughly. I still write a letter to myself about what it is I'm going to do. And then I write the draft, and it just, I love that energy. It doesn't matter. I just keep going. Words, words, words. You know, it consumes. And I wrote Dress of Violet Taffeta, which is the Lucille Duff Gordon thing. I wrote that during the pandemic, and it was heaven.
Yeah.
To immerse myself in a world that I controlled.
Well, but like you said, like
God knows, I didn't feel like there was much control going on.
But you both were dealing with like, I mean, the Titanic going down, Russia. So I mean, you were dealing with some pretty catastrophic things too. So it was
and the fallout of that very appalling accident, which the accident itself was appalling, but the fallout of it for this couple was terrible. And
like
so
I said,
it was, you know, the Titanic was going down, you know, in America.
Exactly.
And all like, dear God, how's this going to end? And here I was just living in 1912.
But we could keep going on and on with both of you. This has been so much fun. I just loved this conversation. We had great questions come in from the audience. Kate, for those, we're talking the Rose Code, I'm going to put that into the comment section too, that you can get from Warwick's. But if people want to follow you or check out, you have a website or social media that you want to send people to?
Sure. You can always find my website and, you know, blog and so forth at katequinnauthor.com. You can, Kate Quinn Author is also on Twitter and also on Facebook, just Kate Quinn Author. On Instagram, it's Kate Quinn 5975 for some reason, and I got numbers on that one. But you can also find me on Instagram procrastinating.
I love that. That's always a good thing. And Tessa, how about you? For people who want to find out more, where should they go to follow you?
My website, tessaarlen.com. And I have a whole thing called Moments with the Windsors. That's all stuff that I dredged up when I was researching that I couldn't let go, but didn't fit into the book. I did little.
Oh, love that. That's always the fun. Yeah. It's like it saves everybody from doing their own Google searching. They can just go.
Yeah. So what cocktails did they drink, and you know, that sort of thing. And I'm on Facebook, and it's Tessa Arlen. And that's it. I think I'm on Instagram, but I'm not terribly good at that.
It's, you know what, I always tell people, pick one and be that one.
I used to be on Twitter, but not any longer. It just didn't seem to connect with me somehow.
Yeah, Twitter's a different world.
Yeah. But that's how you can find me.
Yep. Excellent. Well, ladies, thank you so much. I'm going to say good night. This is being recorded, so it'll be on our YouTube channel. So good night to you, and good night to everybody that's watching us on Facebook. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Tessa, congratulations on a wonderful novel hitting shelves. I hope you have some bubbly.
So do I. Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.